Good morning, class. As you can see, we're continuing with our examples that we could see in our force review project. Today, we're going to be going over an example from friction and an example from gravity. Let's go ahead and take a look at our friction. Here's one of the conditions that we're going to have to make a problem around. One problem must have an object that is speeding up despite friction being applied to it. So this means I have friction being applied, but the object is also speeding up. For me to think of what I need to do, I'm going to begin drawing my situation. Here's my object. Maybe it's a box, and maybe it's going to be speeding up. I know cars speed up, so I'm going to use a little imagination and turn it into a car. Now, if it's speeding up, that means it's going somewhere. I'm going to think about a direction. Maybe it's moving this way, to the right. And what does speeding up mean? Speeding up means that it is accelerating, and when it's speeding up, the acceleration is in the same direction as the velocity. So my velocity and my acceleration are in the same direction. Now, if these are all kinematics forms, I want this to be about forces. So I need to figure out what this is telling me. Well, we always know that the acceleration is responsible for our net force. So this means we have a total net force which is in the same direction as the acceleration. I want friction to be working on this. If it is moving, as we see to the right, the friction is going to have to be going to the left. Force friction. Now, how can I make a net force equation that ends up heading to the right when I have a force of friction that is heading to the left? I'm going to need another force, aren't I? I'm going to need another force that is to the right as well. And what do we have to see about this is that this force, maybe I'm going to call it the engine force because it's a car, this engine force has to be larger than the force of friction for it to overcome the friction and begin speeding up to the right. So this is my condition. For us to have an object that is still speeding up, we know we're going to need some other force that is going to be greater than the friction to apply that. And that will be how we fulfill the condition that's required for this particular problem. All that's left to do here is to give it a story and make a word problem out of it and apply the appropriate values and numbers. Let's look at gravity now. One of our gravity conditions is that we have to make a problem using Newton's universal law of gravitation. For those of us who forgot, what was Newton's universal law of gravitation? Well, that was the force of gravity between any two objects is equal to the gravitational constant multiplied by the product of the two masses divided by the distance between their centers squared. Now, the real easy thing about this is that this is a universal law of gravitation, which means we can choose any two objects. Because it's universal, this law applies to anything. So this is fantastic. What we're really going to have to watch out for here is remembering what R represents. So this means if you make a problem about the Earth, perhaps, and that there is a satellite floating above it, a value such as the altitude, how far the satellite is above the surface of the Earth, doesn't give us the full information. R has to include the radius of the Earth. Now you might think, oh, then I won't do a problem like that. Just so you know, a problem like this is actually a very common type of problem that you will find in physics questions. So if anything, making a problem where you're going to have to take that extra step to think about it would be very helpful, because when you make a problem, when you begin thinking of it yourself, it'll help you remember, because that is very possible that that might be a type of question that I put on a quiz or worksheet or test situation. Making a story for this problem, hopefully you'll find is very easy because you can have any two objects. It could be a satellite and a planet. It could be the force of gravity between two people who are just sitting next to each other. That is, these are all really good options. It could be any two objects. Well, that's all for today. Be sure to ask me if you have any questions on what sort of things I'm looking for. Have a good day.